This is one of the, like I said, largest ongoing battles in the state, and is preventing, what we need to do is prevent the construction of the replacement Line 3 tar sands pipeline. The land of literally 10,000 lakes plus has an especially large weight, as most of Minnesota's waterways are extremely interconnected. As the current pipeline currently deteriorates in the ground, the answer is not to continue dependence on an especially harmful form of fossil fuels. Tar sands requires just about as much energy to extract it from the ground as we get out of it, so there's virtually no payoff. The rerouting path would push through indigenous tribes and communities out of their sacred land, putting wild rice agriculture ecosystems and pristine waters in direct threat to pollution and degradation. As Indigenous people have been denied basic human rights by our government, we cannot and will not allow Enbridge to put their own industry over people whom we have stolen from, abused, and profited off of for centuries. While the pipeline has been delayed, this fight will not be over soon, because the MPCA will continue to look over these permits and not finitely get rid of them. We would like to directly call on the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to put a definitive end to the replacement pipeline. Without discontinuing the importance to northern Minnesota jobs, this industry has the unique opportunity to retrain its workers to be able to sustain themselves and their families with clean energy alternatives and renewable infrastructure, because the future of Minnesota's waterways and people literally depend on it. Thank you. Now we're going to do a short little chant about pipelines. So I'm going to say no tar sands, and you're going to say no way, and I'm going to say not ever, and you're going to say not today. Got it? And who works often with Line 3, his name is Andy Pearson, and he's going to give us a short little speech about why Line 3 is so bad and the work that Minnesota 350 does consistently to end the Line 3 pipeline.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Abby, and all the organizers here today. Can y'all hear me? Yes. All right. So hello, everybody. My name's Andy Pearson, he, him. I work with Minnesota 350. I've been fighting the Line 3 pipeline along with thousands of other people across this state for just over 6 years, and we are going to keep fighting that pipeline until we stop it. So, you know, I was going to talk about the basics of the project, and thank you for talking about them. So what I want to do is take some of that information, right, and put it into context for why we talk about this pipeline when we're here at a climate change gathering today. Like, what is it about this project that puts it near the top of our list for the importance of dealing with this massive issue of climate change, right? I mean, we see the West Coast right now. We see the fires breaking up and down. There we see the Gulf Coast, you know, with all these tropical storms that have come in this year, and we have massive work to do, and we need to get started on that work right now. So Line 3, right? This is a pipeline. The Enbridge company says it'd be a replacement, but it's really a brand new pipeline. Comes all the way down from Alberta, carrying the world's dirtiest oil, bringing it across some of the world's freshest water and ecosystems, and right down to where it can be refined and get into our gas tanks in our cars, get into asphalt, get into a lot of these really absolutely dirty products we need to be moving beyond. So when we think about the carbon damage from this pipeline, we can quantify it a little bit. It's over 50 coal plants worth of damage. We're 38 million cars on the road. We can also think of it in terms of how many Minnesota's worth of impact would this be, like economy-wide. So it is more impact than the entire state of Minnesota is having right now on damaging our climate. So, you know, we never build 50 coal plants these days, right? Like, we basically know that. If a Canadian company came and they said, yeah, we want to build 50 coal plants, we'd probably say, get right back to Canada with that idea. That's a terrible idea. So we got to say that with this pipeline project. We can't do that. It is unconscionable for the impact on climate alone to to build this pipeline right now, given what we know. This is oil we need to be moving beyond. And climate is not the only reason, right? We're here talking climate, but we need to be talking climate justice. And I was glad that we acknowledged the land that we're standing on and that we talked about the treaties, right? Because this pipeline has incredible impacts, disproportionate impacts from the state's own study on the indigenous people living in Minnesota. So this project would cross treaty land. It would take away the ability of organizers, of people, of entire communities to hunt, fish, and gather. These are rights that are protected by treaty. And sometimes people ask, well, hey, you know, as somebody who isn't native, I'm white, why should I care about treaties? Why are those my issues? And what I say is, well, think about the treaties, right? Have you ever read one? Have you seen that there's 2 places that those treaties are signed, right? And well, I don't have ancestry for one of those sets of names. You know, I probably do for the U.S. government side, right? And that is an absolute travesty. We know that the history of treaties and the history of broken treaties is an absolutely toxic legacy that we are still working to overcome here. But my request, my demand, I'll say to everybody here who may have some ancestry that's part of the U.S. government side of those treaties, is to say, think about your responsibilities, because treaties protected rights and they impose responsibilities, individual responsibilities and responsibilities on governments. We are seeing that the state of Minnesota is not upholding its governmental responsibility under treaties, and so it is up to us to uphold our individual responsibilities under treaties. If we are people of our word, we need to keep those commitments, and right now that means we need to stop the Line 3 pipeline. Are we clear on this? Yeah. All right. Recently, the state refiled a legal challenge against this pipeline. We probably saw that. Commissioner Steve Kelly stepped out and he refiled this appeal, and the governor signed off on it, knew it was happening, put out a statement. That was brave. We know that a lot of these systems of power were built by the corporations that we are working to oppose. We know that they do not work for us. The Minnesota Senate did not work for us when they removed Steve Kelly from his position a couple of weeks ago. They fired him over that brave stance that he took to fight Line 3. To say, we don't have the data yet. We don't have proof that this pipeline's even needed, and the climate impacts are too big. So we need to say no. So what we're asking for isn't easy, right? We know that there are political consequences sometimes. But we are honestly so far past the point for asking for small things at this point, right? We know that, we see it every day. We need to be asking for the big things at this point. That means stopping the pipeline. And like you said, Abby, that means making sure that our Minnesota Pollution Control Agency stands strong, says no to these water permits, and absolutely makes it clear that this pipeline has no place in Minnesota. And if they don't do that, go back to what I said about treaty responsibility. If they don't do that, if they don't make the choice to be brave, then it's on us to be brave, right? And I want everybody to commit out of here to follow up with the organizations that are there on the front lines. GNU Collective, look up stopline3.org. These are the indigenous-led groups that are in the struggle on the front lines, working to build that resistance so that this pipeline can never happen. And I want us all who are here in the cities who maybe have the privilege to have access to government, access to the Pollution Control Agency, those places, to use that so that it never comes to a big, on-the-ground fight up there, because nobody wants that, right? Everybody wants government to work. Everybody wants people to be brave and do what we need to do, everybody here, so that this pipeline is never built. So with that, thank you so much. We are doing the important work here today, and it's so good to see so many people standing up, and let's keep doing that.
I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Our next speaker's name is Celine Jennings. They are from St. Louis, Missouri, and they came to school in Minnesota. Minnesota. That is why they're here. Similar to me, I'm also here for school. Since then, they've organized in the environmental and labor sections to build worker and people power. They believe that there is no justice without racial and social justice. And with that, I would really like to welcome our friend Selene today. Hi all, thank you so much for being here and for fighting back against this heinous system and their disgusting treatment of our communities, of our future, and of our planet. Capitalism is destroying our planet. The climate crisis, racism, xenophobia, war, and all other plagues against our society are fueled by capitalism and by trying to keep the people down. But we are not doing that today. We are not standing down. You all stood up, and you all need to keep standing up, because this is how we fight back. This is how we win. One of our asks of the University of Minnesota is to divest from fossil fuels. Because fossil fuels are destroying our lives, destroying our planet, despite what those people atop their privileged hills will have you see and believe. Because communities like indigenous communities, low-income communities, communities of color, and all other vulnerable populations are getting the brunt of this impact and not being able to reap any of the benefits that the top get. So with big oil, we are already seeing it failing. For the past decade, we have seen a sharp decline in their productivity and in their revenue. Just in the last 6 years alone, their production and their productivity has gone down 70%. This translates to, so Exxon, you all have probably bought some Exxon oil before. They're one of the biggest oil companies in the world. And they are already planning to write off 20% of their revenue this year. That means billions of dollars lost for them. That's a big win. That is a huge win. Already this year, $45 billion have been lost in the oil, in big oil. This is a huge win. The stock market is finally representing what the people have been saying for decades. But we can't stop there, because policy, our fascist leader and his puppets are finding other ways to make sure that oil stays in power. The CARES Act, the piece of legislation that was supposed to protect the people and help us during this pandemic. They snuck in $300 billion worth of corporate tax cuts to make sure that big oil stays in power. Big time boo. So we gotta keep fighting. We gotta keep fighting, because they aren't gonna stop. They don't care if it's not productive for them anymore. They don't care if they're not even making money off of it anymore, because it keeps them in power. So what they need to do is divest from fossil fuels. And we need to make sure that all of our institutions divest from fossil fuels and reinvest in community-controlled funds. And that brings us to one of our other demands of the university, is to reinvest in the community, to uplift communities, to drive social equity, to make sure that our planet does not rise in temperature to the point of not being able to sustain human life. We need to keep fighting, keep showing up, keep being the boots on the ground, and make sure that we win. We fight for environmental justice, we fight for social justice, and we fight for racial justice. That's right. For the people, by the people. Okay, I'm going to talk about carbon neutrality. So, Minnesota is actually home to quite a few large corporations. 3 of them we are trying to target today. They are Target, General Mills, and Cargill. Why are we targeting them? Because they emit a ton of carbon into our environment. Why is carbon bad? Because carbon is the CO2 and the methane and all of the icky stuff that gets into our air and makes our planet really hot and gives us all the things from the climate crisis that we do not like. So, carbon neutrality is having a net zero carbon footprint. It refers to achieving
net zero carbon dioxide emissions by balancing carbon dioxide emissions with carbon removal or simply eliminating carbon dioxide emissions altogether. That's a super technical definition, but I'm going to break it down for you. So there's a few issues with the way that these companies are going about reaching carbon neutrality. The first issue is they're not doing it at all. The second issue is that when they are doing it, they're saying that they're going to do it way too late. 2050 is far too long. The ones that are trying to get to net zero carbon emissions are mainly trying to get there by buying carbon offsets. Okay, so here's the deal with carbon offsets. They're great, but they're not. It's nice that they're trying, but we want to try to get Target, General Mills, and Cargill to commit to getting to carbon neutrality through authentic means, meaning transitioning to true clean energy and not buying clean energy from smaller corporations and saying that that clean energy is theirs. The other issues is that when corporations buy carbon offsets, often they're buying new growth trees, especially susceptible to permanent damage from forest fires, which, as we have seen, are becoming more common because of the climate crisis, which is here. It's not happening tomorrow. It's not happening in a week. It's not happening in a few years. It's literally here. Smaller corporations are selling off carbon offsets to larger corporations like Target, General Mills, and Cargill so that they can say that they are better for the environment when in reality it's actually smaller corporations that are doing the work. We have put Band-Aid over Band-Aid over Band-Aid, and at some point we need to rip the Band-Aid off. And the point is that this must be before 2050. It needs to be by 2030. These three companies need to commit to this. We are going to work. We can use our financial power. We can use our labor power, withhold it, and make them listen to us. And do not let them trick you into thinking that they do not have the means or the technology to do this. Target CEO is worth more than I will make in my entire life.
Multiple life.
General Mills CEO is probably worth than me and Abby will make in our entire life.
Maybe all of us.
Cargill CEO is probably worth more than all of us will make in our entire life.
Among multiple lifetimes.
And economic study after economic study tells us that transitioning and investing in clean energy is actually a better financial gain in the long term. So why are we not doing it? It is better for all of the people who uphold these corporations with their consumer and labor power. It is far beyond time for adaptive change. We will not recycle our way out of this crisis. Demand change for your corporate leadership. Make your voice louder than these disgusting fossil fuel lobbying industries by any means possible. Okay, I want to lead a chant, because I feel like we need a chant, about how capitalism is killing the climate. His name is Emerson. He is a trans activist and radiology tech student at St. Catherine's. He is a member of Socialist Alternative.
Sweet.
Hi everyone, how's everybody doing tonight? Can we get another round of applause for the amazing organizers who put this together? And what I heard, only 5 days. Very impressive rally for 5 days. So as Kalisa said, my name is Emerson. I am a radiology tech student at St. Catherine's University. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm a member of Socialist Alternative. I think that it would be an understatement to say that we are facing a climate catastrophe right now. The catastrophe is at the door. In the U.S., we've seen that our government refuses to provide clean water to Black, brown, and working communities in Flint, Michigan, and across the nation. We see the building of ineffective and polluting pipelines on indigenous lands that are backed by major banks. And we see now the complete inability to address the fires that are raging across the west coast of our nation. This is completely and totally unacceptable and doesn't even begin to address the momentous amount of harm that we have done across the world in an imperialist pursuit for oil and resources in other nations. Sorry, just get my phone. So I think as young people, we are very understandably outraged in this situation. And we have turned this anger into million-strong marches around the globe. I'm just going to take my mask off. With million-strong marches around the globe that have linked up with communities of color, young people, students, workers, and all those who want to protect the planet. Today alone, there are said to be 2,900 marches happening around the globe protesting the governments and corporations that refuse to take real and immediate measures to address the climate crisis. But we need to be clear about what we mean when we say real and immediate action. It is not enough for politicians and corporations to play lip service to the problem. We need bold solutions, and we need them now. As a socialist, I believe that the climate crisis is directly related to capitalism. The destruction of our planet creates untold profits for a very small, wealthy elite, while the rest of us suffer the disastrous consequences. The corporations tell us that it is our fault, that if only we had bought their electric car, if only we had sorted our recyclables, if only we had taken a little longer shower, while they rake in profits. It is not our responsibility to recycle our way out of this crisis. Reports show that 100 companies have produced 71% of global emissions since 1988. Amazon alone creates 44.4 million metric tons of carbon dioxide a year. And yet Jeff Bezos literally said that he can't think of anything better to do with his money than invest it in space travel. These millionaires would rather go and colonize other planets than help and save the climate crisis here on Earth. If we want to take on the fight to save the planet, we need to take on big business and the whole entire system of capitalism. We need to tax big polluters to fund a Green New Deal. And we want that Green New Deal to invest in massive green infrastructure projects, to retool the fossil fuel industry and transfer us over to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Build high-speed, high-quality, free public transit across this country, to build millions of units of deeply affordable, publicly owned, sustainably built housing. And we want that to be built with green union jobs that can give families an income to live off of. But these corporations and the government officials that are in concert with them will continue to do anything that they possibly can to stop us. They do not want to be taxed, and they do not want their profits cut. In Seattle, Socialist City Council member Shama Sawan just led a fight to tax Amazon and the top 3% of corporations in Seattle to the tune of $250 million a year to pay for affordable housing and a Green New Deal. That is phenomenal. But what has happened is that Jeff Bezos and his big business cronies immediately turned around and they've launched a recall campaign to get her out of office in the hopes that if they remove her, they can get that tax repealed. What's absolutely absurd is that $250 million is a minuscule a modest amount in comparison to the enormous amounts of profits that Jeff Bezos and other large corporations like him are able to create. So we need to be sober about what we're up against when it comes to fighting for climate justice. I think that it shows that winning a Green New Deal will require building a fighting movement, which is unafraid to stand up to big business. And it's the big businesses that are responsible for this crisis and for fighting to an alternative system to capitalism. One which prioritizes people and planet over profit. To me, that means fighting for socialism, a system that could take the top polluters into public ownership and put them under the democratic control of ordinary people. The question of system change is not a theoretical or abstract one. Young people across the globe have concluded that system change is necessary in order to ensure our survival. We have an unprecedented stake in this fight, but we cannot turn to the systems and forces that have failed us over and over and over again. We need to get organized. We need to build a movement of our own, separate from corruption, separate from corporate money, democratically run by working and oppressed people, and one that puts the people and planet over profit. Today I'm wearing a shirt that has Fred Hampton on it. He's one of my heroes. He was a member of the Black Panthers in Chicago. And he said, if you dare to struggle, you dare to win. And I dare us to struggle so we can dare to win a future for our planet. Thank you. Are we ready? 6, 1, 2, 6, 7, 3, 2, 1, 0, 0. Let's say that again. We're calling Mayor Fry next week. We're telling him it is 100% completely unacceptable to be sending SWAT teams into parks to remove unhoused people for what? You want to know why they were removed? Because someone was having a fucking birthday party! Disgusting! I'm pissed off. I can't be gentle about this one. Here's the number one more time. 6, 1, 2, 6, 7, 3, 2, 1, 0, 0. Call him next week. I will post a script in the Facebook event page. You can read it. We are standing up for these people. It is 100% unacceptable. Okay. Our next speaker. We have Ginger from Socialist Alternative. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, I mean, every speaker today has been both so powerful and highlighted incredibly important aspects of what it looks like to build a movement and a struggle for climate justice, but for also justice and a world that people can actually live in, that prioritizes humanity over profit. And I think it'd be a mistake to not also highlight the murder of Breonna Taylor and how that was linked to gentrification and the pushing of a billionaire-backed agenda for housing, not the type of housing that working class communities actually need. And I think it's absolutely correct that we are angry about the disgusting injustice from the grand jury decision regarding Breonna Taylor's murder. No-knock raids were authorized because they wanted to move the black community out of that neighborhood so they could build luxury development. But I think for millions of us across the country, this is just one more indictment of a system that is rigged against justice for working class people, especially black communities. And the reality is, as working people living under a profit-driven system that oppresses, destroys the planet, using the police one day to break up protests, the next day to break up strikes, the billionaire class is truly terrified that we will draw conclusions about the bankruptcy of their system. So I don't think anyone here would disagree that racism is built into the foundations of for-profit housing.
affected by poorly funded schools, which are linked to property taxes. Or that environmental racism is clearly embedded in the history of U.S. capitalism, and that the global South is under serious threat from climate catastrophe. But I would ask, is knowing this enough to help us fight? And I think not. We're forcing corporations to say Black Lives Matter, but that is empty as long as they are paying poverty wages, union busting, organizing only to protect their profits, destroying the environment with no intention of paying the price needed to end the racism of their system. And we should be clear that the same is true of the political establishment. The world saw how last summer Minneapolis City Council made bold promises on policing that they had no intention of keeping. And this is why I think we can have no trust in City Hall to dismantle the racist MPD or to fight for the housing we need, exactly as Callista just highlighted. They have made mistakes on housing, and they are now kicking people out of parks, assuming that it's the fault of the Parks Department and trying to say that it's not their responsibility when it absolutely is. But they keep saying, leave it to us, we got this. Do they got this?
Fuck no.
City Hall has tried for years to sell us on some idea of trickle-down affordability, while big developers build luxury units and profit off of a housing crisis they helped create, and City Hall is rubber stamped. It's not just because of COVID that homelessness is increasing so dramatically. In Louisville and in cities across the country, we should be honest, it's Democratic Party politicians who are responsible for racist policing and a lack of affordable housing, underfunded schools, and expensive, inadequate public transit. We need independent, working class, movement-based candidates who are prepared to take on big business and the police.
Oops.
And this is why I'm a socialist, because I think to deal with COVID, we should have nurses and doctors and researchers and the logistics industry, the working people who are working in it, democratically deciding our approach to the pandemic and how resources and medical supplies are distributed. And we should be able to stay safe at home without worrying about being evicted or catching COVID. I think our movement needs our own party, independent of the political establishment, that continuously bows down to big business, offering only lip service to our planet, to our struggles for racial, gender, and economic equity. And so I was the lead organizer in 15 Now. It was the campaign to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour in Minneapolis. And we built a grassroots movement of people talking to their coworkers in their workplaces. We tabled on street corners. We organized on the campus. Low-wage workers and students took strike action to demand 15. We gathered over 20,000 signatures from Minneapolis supporters of a $15 minimum wage. And I use this as an example because I think it parallels to a lot of the climate justice movement. First, City Hall said that it was illegal. Then City Hall said it was impossible. But by building the movement that was willing to organize in every workplace and on every corner, to rely on working people like us to lead that fight until the very last vote, we made possible what City Hall said would never happen, and we won. Woo, woo, woo. It's organizing and protest that can make possible what the political establishment says is impossible. We can win when working class communities get organized in multiracial struggle, protesting and striking and saying that as long as we stress about paying the bills, whether we will have a planet to live on in the next few years, there will be no more business as usual. Because let's be clear, I want to defeat the terrors of Trump. But what does it mean to our neighbors who fear being evicted by a police force sent out by the Democratic Party? Millions are struggling to pay rent during this pandemic. If City Hall tries to use their law enforcement to evict our neighbors, will we let them? We need to stand shoulder to shoulder and say not one COVID eviction. We're organizing right now with folks who are organizing within the encampments as well, and folks who are doing outreach to the homeless community. We want to make sure that we are ready to stand with renters. If you are facing an eviction, don't move out. If you are a working or middle-class homeowner who is facing a struggle to pay your mortgage, don't move out. We can build a movement and a network of community members, a network of neighbors to protect our neighbors, banding together, working in middle-class homeowners, renters, people who are living in the parks. We can fight for the housing that working-class communities and students actually need, not the type of for-profit housing that is all about corporate landlords trying to break in profits during the pandemic. We can build renters committees where they don't exist and strengthen them where they're already getting organized. We can talk to our neighbors, coworkers, and build the type of collective action that can win against these corporate landlords, because we need rent forgiveness for everyone who has fallen behind during the pandemic. Healthcare corporations, corporate landlords, and Wall Street are profiting off the COVID-19 pandemic and will fight over our future. They'll try to make us pay for this. We can counter them by building an independent movement that can dismantle the fossil fuel corporations and run a green energy grid under democratic control of working people. We can do the same with healthcare, we can do the same with housing. But these are big, powerful entities we are up against. To me, that's the fight for a socialist world democratically run by us, not by billionaire profits, for equality and an end to the destruction of our planet. So Callista asked me to try and lead another chant for us here too, if that's okay? So I'm going to say our rights, and you're going to say our human rights. And then I'm going to say our rights, or, yes, okay. Our rights are, and then you're going to say indigenous rights. And then I'm going to say our rights, our human rights, and then you're going to say our rights are Latino rights. Did I get this right? Sure. Woo! Okay, and real quick before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to say, take the time whenever you see a really awesome revolutionary policy change in your state, area, city, whatever it is, look for who the organizer that was responsible for that and say thank you to them. They work hard. Okay, our next speaker is Juaria. She is born and raised in North Minneapolis. She's passionate about creating art and doing community organizing. She is with MN Youth Climate Strike. Quick clap for Juaria. She's a poet. She's very talented. She's really good. She works on commissions. Buy poems from her.
Yep.
Perfect. So yeah, my name is Juaria. I'm with the Minnesota Youth Climate Strike, and the U of M Climate Strike is also here. So if you guys see you, make sure to check them out. I'm going to be sharing a spoken word, but I wanted to first touch on what Cal and Clarence were talking about earlier, which is about the homeless people who are evicted. So I'm a part of a couple of volunteers and just comrades who have been doing volunteering and organizing around these encampments, and you know, a lot of them have been helping out with making food, making sure that supplies are there. And yesterday when we found out that they were evicted at 6 a.m. in the morning because of a birthday party, we ended up organizing a rally that happened here at this exact place yesterday at around 5 p.m. And later on, the cops ended up showing up with rides here when there was only about 40 of us that were just out there. But we ended up walking all the way to PV Park and just holding space there. The entire park no longer has any of the tents, no longer has any of the residents, and I think that it's just extremely disgusting to know that homeless people are getting kicked out, volunteers are getting locked up for absolutely no reason. So I think that right now when we're talking about the mess of the system, we need to make sure that there's a system to replace it. You know, we only have each other, and so as much as we tend to ask our, you know, our mayors and our community, our council members to do something, we need to take action upon ourselves and make sure that we're showing up in person. Make sure that we're showing up to these parks, make sure that, you know, we are being volunteers, we're helping organize food, we're helping organize supplies, because if the people aren't there, if we aren't there, we have nobody. We only have each other, and we got to make sure that we stick up for ourselves. So, yeah. Thank you. So, I will be doing a spoken word. I'm Somali, and my family immigrated from Somalia. And
Will you point us halfway so I can hear you better?
oh, sorry. Is this better?
We'll just like point it over there so then it's cool.
Point it at Omar. Okay, cool. Hope this is better. But yeah, so I'm Somali. My parents are immigrants from Somalia, and
I think that, the climate crisis is so intersectional in the ways that it affects people back home and the way that it affects us over here. So I'll be sharing a spoken word that is kind of around that. It's called My City. My city is quite different. It's never quiet here. We hear sirens every day. The streets light up in fear. My city is quite different. Our whole family lives here. We run to the park because all of our friends live near. This city is never quiet. All of our laughter fills the air. Our broken smiles, joyful faces, we cover up with things we care. Because we're just some city kids asking God to heal from the repercussions of racial violence, police brutality, environmental racism, and all these things. Too many things a child shouldn't ever see. But we learned as a community how to block out the daily sirens, never let them sense our discomfort, how to perform poetry and art at the neighborhood block, how to dance without our feet ever touching the ground, how to sing so loudly the whole neighborhood can hear us. We learned as a community how to be a family from around the world, but I'm still trying to find my family that's around the world in Somalia. I want to go back home, but where is home? Because my country is the Horn of Africa, at least that's what we're told, but the Horn sounds of terror has me shook to my core. How climate change is changing the land we once owned. Now it's barren and our people are fighting to get a little more. I want to go home. To Somalia, where we have the longest coastline in Africa, where our people are known for their poetry and their artistry, and all of these things that were pouring to me for gifts. I want to go back home to where my family traveled from. I want to see Mogadishu and Kismayo. I want to see Galkayo and Hargeisa. I want to see where I'm from. But will I have that luxury? Because honestly, I'm not sure how much climate change will take from me. From us, from our home, from our motherland. How much more how much more will we lose to a crisis that slipped from our hands? How much more till we don't have a home to go back to? Because honestly, I just want to go home.
Hear me? Yeah? Okay. First, let's give a shout out to them for organizing this event. Another round of applause. So yeah, they asked me kind of to speak about Black Lives Matter. I know that this is primarily about the climate, but they made it a point to say that all of these issues are intertwined, which they are. And my main topic was going to be defund the police, which, I mean, I can go into depths on how increasing police will never result in a decrease of crime, right? You have two communities, you over-police one, there's just more cops to catch more crime. So that will never be the answer. I wrote a little thing about it, but I'm sure, I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure you all understand. So I will jump to defunding. And when we say that, I know a lot of people's first reaction is, well, if you don't pay the police, who's going to protect us? But like I said, defunding, or more police never equals less crime. So, hold on, I gotta skip some parts that I wrote. Oh, also, I'll just say, like, I went to college in small town rural Iowa, and when all this has been going on, all of those people I met there always wanted to talk to me about things going on. So if you ever want to have a conversation, I'm not good at explaining this to people that don't get it. If you ever need me to help you out, I got you. So, you know, adding more police will raise statistical crime rates, which starts to break down family structures by sending people to jail, to prison. It'll lower property values, increase tension between the community and law enforcement. Will also lead city officials to take money away from schooling and social services to go toward policing. And all of these implications will sink a community closer to poverty. And when people live in poverty, that's when they start to see crime as their only option to escape. And when there's no resources in the community, they start to fight each other over them. And that is why defunding the police is necessary. It will decrease crime. The only way impoverished community can move forward is by decriminalization and funding of social services. First, drugs need to be decriminalized, both the sale of and the use of, because how many times do you see companies promoting CBD products now? The cannabis industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry, but the pioneers of selling and using weed we're all in prison, we're all in jail, we're all criminalized. And it's funny how rich people always find a way to exploit poor and criminalize individuals. They also need to decriminalize sex work. They need to decriminalize and put funding toward mental health, both for disability services and for counseling and therapists for our students and for our adults. And when someone is having a mental health crisis, the only people we know to call are the police. If someone is having a bad day, I can assure you that untrained, unstable cops with guns are the last persons that they want to talk to. And this is why we need to fund and use mental health officers to exclusively deal with these issues, or at least to be accompanied by regular police officers. They need to refund our schools. It's funny, they say we can't defund the police, but they've been defunding education for years. They need to decriminalize being poor. We need to fund affordable, low-income housing as well as no-income housing, because homelessness is not a crime. Somehow we don't have money to shelter unhoused folks in the cities, but we have money to pay the Minneapolis Park Police to pull up on encampments and evict people. People who have close to nothing are being targeted, and the few possessions they have are being bulldozed and thrown into a dumpster. That's the Park Police. Who are they serving and protecting? Correct, the wealthy, yes. They aren't serving and protecting us by any means. We need to put money toward preventing climate change, toward preventing climate change. The money we spend on policing things that aren't criminal in nature is one of the biggest issues. They have become too generalized and too militarized. So when we say defund, it means spend the money elsewhere. And I have this piece written, so when I explain this to my conservative friends, acquaintances, people I used to know, people I used to talk to, when I explain this to them, that whole time I was talking, I don't mention race, right? I purposefully take that out of it because they don't see color, right? So I explain all of that, and then they're like, okay, I see what you're saying. Now if we add race on top of that, and the historical implications of those situations, you know, we'll go from, the runaway slave patrols to Jim Crow laws, to the war on drugs, which were all admittedly aimed to oppress black people, right? And so this kind of takes me to, yes, defund, but also abolish. We need to abolish the police as we know it. So when we say abolish police, it makes sense, because did they say we need to reform slavery, or do they say we need to abolish slavery? Right, but that's also a trick question, because if you know the details of the 13th Amendment, you'll see that slavery wasn't abolished, it was reformed into our current police and prison system. And with climate change threatening our very existence on this planet, it's clear to see how the oppressive systems in this country overlap. Not only is policing and the U.S. military some of the largest contributors to pollution in the world, they also then try to fight their implications with slave labor. If you look at California, so much of the state burning from wildfires, a problem caused by these oppressive systems, you also notice that they are using prison labor to fight these fires. One definition of slavery, I just Googled it, is a condition compared to that of a slave in respect of exhausting labor or restricted freedom. And that is exactly what happens with regard to police and prisons and our justice system. We need to abolish all of it. It was never intended to serve and protect. It was created to enslave. This is why we need to abolish police as we know it. And that's a long-term goal, right? There's going to be a lot of backlash, and that's fine, that's expected. They fought a whole war over abolishing slavery. So what can we do in the meantime? One goal that a lot of the organizations are pushing for currently is CPAC, which is Civilian Police Accountability Council. Because if we pay for our police, and their job is to serve and protect us, then we should be in charge of deciding if they're doing their job or not. CPAC will give us the power to hold police accountable, which clearly isn't being done. For example, if we had CPAC, the officers who were responsible for Breonna Taylor's murder would be held accountable. Because now our current system values the drywall of the neighboring apartment more than they value her black life. So if we could, just for a second, I'd like to take a moment of silence for Breonna Taylor. C4J.net. So that is T as in Tom, CC, both as in community, CC, the number 4, J as in justice.net. So it explains, that worked, right? Someone tell me that worked? Yep. All right. So that explains what CPAC is and the steps we need to make sure that we get it. That is run by the Twin Cities Coalition of Justice for Jamar. They do a lot of good work. I'm not a member of any organization. I just like to go out and support all of them and let my voice be heard whenever there is a chance, which is what all of us are doing. So I commend all of you for that. Other organizations I'd like to shout out is Black Lives Matter Minnesota, Black Lives Matter St. Paul, Justice Squad, On-Site Public Media, and Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence. If you've had a chance to go to any of their events, I'm sure you've seen how incredible they are. The work that they do is amazing work, especially Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence. We have all of these big cases that go across the country. George Floyd just happened to happen here. We hear about Breonna Taylor, where she was at, but there are so many that happen in the state of Minnesota. Families Supporting Families Against Police Violence brings those families all together and gives them a platform because they are all still fighting for justice. There are way too many stolen lives in this state, and way too many families that are still fighting for justice, and we need to support them. Yes, we need to support the big national cases, but we need to support our neighbors, we need to support our unhoused folks, we need to support LGBTQ plus communities. We need to support everybody right here, right now, and that's what we're doing. We need to support our planet so that we have a place to support our neighbors on. Thank you.
My name is Meredith, and I'm with the Anti-War Committee and the Climate Justice Committee. The Anti-War Committee has recently started this Climate Justice Committee because we feel like this is an important issue that needs to be talked about. The fact of the matter is that the U.S. Department of Defense has a larger annual carbon footprint than most of the countries on the planet. We're not talking about the whole United States, we're talking about one agency in the federal government. In fact, the U.S. military is the single biggest emitter of CO2 in the world, aside from places that are actually countries. And if the U.S. military was a country, it would be the 55th biggest emitter in the whole world. So when the United States says, and this president and previous presidents have said, oh, well, we really need fill-in-the-blank country to come to the table to be a leader on this issue because we don't have the ability to lead on this issue, they are strategically forgetting about the fact that not only is our country a huge emitter, but we are an international leader in terms of climate emissions just in our military alone. In addition, I think it's important to think about what the U.S. military does in order to contribute to environmental destruction. You think about how many wars for oil the U.S. has organized and orchestrated and then refuses to leave over. You think about how the U.S. in places like Colombia and places like Southeast Asia has repeatedly used defoliants in order to wipe out rainforests so they can better see people that they can shoot at. If you think about the role the U.S. has played in places like Iraq, where the U.S. repeatedly uses depleted uranium, and has not only caused a huge outbreak of cancer in that country, but we have literally ruined the topsoil in Iraq. Additionally, the CJC is incredibly concerned with Biden's weak plan on climate. And I think it's important to understand that, first of all, one candidate at least acknowledges that there is climate change. The other candidate has so many issues, but we're just going to talk about one is that he doesn't even understand science. But in terms of Joe Biden, he's really proud of the fact that his quote-unquote plan says that we would get to zero emissions by 2050.
Boo.
2050!
Boo.
As my daughter said, who's 11, she's like, well, that's great, he's going to be dead by then. She's like, well, I'm going to be alive, and that's not good enough. And she's not going. 2050 is not a plan. 2050 is not a plan. And additionally, if you read his plan, it is all about how we need to build up the U.S. military because he's anticipating that there will be wars for resources, and he wants the U.S. to win them. That is not a plan to decrease climate change. Because I've already said, The U.S. military is a huge emitter. Imperialism is not the answer to get us out of this problem of climate change. That is 100% the wrong direction. So it is imperative that we do two things. One, that we recognize that we need these movements to make connections. And every speaker up here today has been talking about how we need to connect the climate, the other issues, and the thing that the CJC is working on is trying to connect climate change with the anti-war movement. That we need people to see that these struggles should be one, and not that they should be separate struggles. But the second is that we need to be making demands on the Biden campaign to say, you want us to vote for you? Minnesota is strategic? Well, guess what? We have demands for you too. We need you to do better because we need these changes made in our lifetime. We need these changes made in a decade, not in decades. Because we need to turn this around now, not wait till later when there's so little to protect. When the earth is under attack, what do we do? 15 minutes left of our scheduled time together. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming out. If I could get everyone to give a shout out, round of applause for everyone who came out and volunteered their time to speak and educate us on these issues. That's fun. And then, real quick, just one more time, that number for Mayor Fry is 612-673-2100. What are we doing next week? Actually do it. I'm posting the script on the Facebook event page. You guys are doing it. That's Mayor Fry's number. If you live in St. Paul, your mayor's number is 651-266-8510. I'll say it again. 651-266-8510. There's a saying in the climate movement that says, think global, act local. That's why we're targeting mayor's offices, governor's offices, park boards, city council. They're extremely accessible to us. We live in the Twin Cities. We have their phone numbers. Call them, make use of them. This strike is mainly to energize you to take action. This is a direct action in and of itself, but without follow-up, there isn't much that's going to come of it. So I just want to end with a few encouraging words that will hopefully leave you all feeling energized enough to call your representatives and take more direct action to make these things possible. Make all of our demands get met. The earth sings her revolution. She calls brave men and women and gender non-conforming people to her defense. The earth is our mother. This may sound like a spiritual statement, but there is scientific evidence that all life on Earth comes from a tiny little prokaryote. All life on Earth. All of us are the children of our one common mother. I want you to think of your own mother. Like her, our Earth nurtured us into existence in magnificent and mysterious ways. We would not kill our own mother. And if anyone tried to put her in danger, we would fight like hell to keep her safe. I am grateful for every single one of you for coming to her defense today. Your presence is powerful. Your voice is powerful. And your voice matters. Do whatever you need to do to make sure your voice is heard. For some of us, that may be voting. For others, it may be supporting direct actions like this strike. It may be withholding your financial or labor power by voting with your dollar, organizing a rent strike, or forming a union at work. It may be taking the time to rest and say no to a project so you have the energy to keep up the fight tomorrow. It may mean persistently calling Mayor Fry, especially next week, or Mayor Carter, and Governor Walz, and City Council, and Park Board.
and state Congress members. It may be performing a job that is crucial to the good of your community. It may be having a courageous conversation with your neighbor, creating powerful art, reading revolutionaries' books. For those of us with white and cisgender privilege, I hope that it will look like creating space to amplify Black, trans, gender nonconforming, and other marginalized voices. For those of us who hold marginalized identities, I hope it will look like finding ways to create safe spaces and nurture our mental health. Whatever you are doing, I see you. There is no room for gatekeeping in the activist community. If you are here today, you are an activist. If you are here today, your voice matters. I hope that we can all try to recognize and encourage each other's work. I hope for us to be able to turn to one another and act with humanity for our mother and for each other.
Yeah.